What's going on there, YouTube? Welcome back to another comic book video. Okay, so it's time for us to do a full story video. A full story video is when I sit down and take a bunch of videos I did in the past and combine them together into one big video. Today's full story video is going to be about, well, Excalibur. And let me explain, because when it came to Excalibur post Onslaught, the question was, where the team goes next, because for the 1990s, for Marvel Comics, they really tried their best to make sure that all the different X books were really connected, including Excalibur, which at first was not really connected to the other X books until, like I said, the 1990s. But when it came to the big event known as Onslaught, for Excalibur, they weren't really around maybe for like a few panels, and that was really it. And so the question for Marvel at that time was what to do with Excalibur post Onslaught. Well, we had the battle for Captain Britain and other storylines that tied into that one single storyline, but also the idea of Colossus and also Kitty Pryde getting their own books as well for a short period of time. So here is the full story video for Excalibur, technically post Onslaught. Okay, so getting back into our coverage over, well, Excalibur, I'm going to say it right now. Some of these storylines we're going to cover, it does take place prior to, well, good old Operation Zero Tolerance. And here's the reason why I didn't really cover these books until now. Because Excalibur to me kind of felt a tad bit off. And let me explain. Because in the 80s, when it came to Chris Claremont and Alan Davis, they launched the book, right? And the thing was, for Excalibur, they wasn't really an X team. Like, they were an X team, but away from the other X teams across the world. And so when it came to Excalibur, they weren't really part of any massive crossovers until the 1990s. Now, yes, they were part of Inferno, but only like for 2 issues, and that was really it. But in the 1990s, you had Marvel say, okay, it's now time for us to make sure Excalibur is now part of the X world, alongside with the other X books. Uncanny X-Men, X-Men, X-Factor, and X-Force. And matter of fact, when it came to Fatal Attractions, Excalibur had a chapter in that actual event. And so for a good moment there, Excalibur was part of all the X books, part of the X family. But in the late 1990s, that didn't feel like that anymore. It kind of felt like they were once again pushing Excalibur away from the other X books. And the thing is, for Onslaught, it really showed there. This massive crossover that had X-Men, Uncanny X-Men, X-Force, X-Factor. You had Punisher, Iron Man, the Avengers. Like, it was a massive crossover. At Excalibur, they had 2 issues that was technically not really part of the crossover. They had a fight against a demon in the Hellfire Club over in London. So unfortunately, they weren't really part of the whole idea Onslaught. And when it came to Operation Zero Tolerance, once again, they were not truly affected. They're kind of left off the board. And so that kind of gave us a tad bit of room here when it came to our coverage over the X-Men, where we could just technically focus on the books that really did matter when it came to Operation Zero Tolerance, and then kind of go back to old books that weren't really, important for the whole idea of Operation Zero Tolerance, like Excalibur. And so that's why today we're going to sit down and cover issue number 104 and 105. Now, this is a Douglock storyline, and for me personally, I don't hate Douglock, and he's not complicated. He's just annoying to me. I don't know why. But here's the thing. See, Douglock is the combination of 2 characters, Doug Ramsey and also Warlock. You see, back in the 1980s, you had a character known as Doug Ramsey, right? He was part of the New Mutants. The problem was that he died back in Fall of the Mutants. Now, when it came to Warlock, who was not a mutant, just an alien, he had died in the 1990s, and I want to say the Extinction Agenda. I could be wrong there. But either way, both characters died. But then in the mid-1990s, we had another event known as the Phalanx Covenant. Now, when it came to the Phalanx, what they did was they had took the dead cells of Douglock and also, well, Warlock and kind of combined the two to create Douglock. Now, for Douglock, he was part of the hive mind of the Phalanx, but he was able to break away from the hive mind with the whole idea that they were not able to add mutants to their hive mind because the mutant gene. And because of Douglock's dead cells, it still had the mutant gene inside of them. And so he was able to, well, break free. And so for Douglock, he had joined Excalibur. But here's the problem though. For Douglock, he has been trying to fit in because for some people, they look at Douglock just as Douglock. You know, the idea that he was a phalanx that was able to technically break away. But for some people, they believe that Douglock is actually Doug Ramsey who came back to life because they could have phalanx. They used the dead cells of Doug Ramsey as a way to bring Douglock to life, and also the dead cells of Warlock as well. And the thing is, you have Douglock right now having this nightmare, and it's the different members of Excalibur paying their respect to the grave of Doug Ramsey. Now, as they're leaving, you have Pete say, Pete Wisdom, it's time for us to go. And then you have Douglock, pop out of the ground, leaving us wondering like, okay, is there a possibility the dream right now is telling us that Douglock is Doug Ramsey? Because again, the Phalanx did use his dead cells as a way to create this being. So what if they actually did bring Doug Ramsey to life, but through the body of Douglock? Now, I want to shift over to Colossus because for Colossus, he had joined the Excalibur, I almost said X-Men there. He had joined Excalibur a while back. And for Colossus, he's kind of lost at the moment because he only joined the X-Men because of Charles Xavier and the dream Charles had. And the idea that you had Charles sold this pitch over to Colossus like your powers and my mission could help change the world. The problem is that by this point, when it came to Charles Xavier, he was Onslaught and he has been arrested. And so for Colossus, it's kind of hard to believe in the dream that Charles wanted to have for the rest of the world. But also in the 1990s for Colossus, it was pretty rough. Like he had technically lost his entire family except for Mikhail, and that's really it. Besides that, everyone else had died. And so for Colossus, he's kind of wondering like, what should he do with his life? But while you have Colossus out there, moping around, you have Pete Wisdom and also Kitty Pryde talking to one another. Now, for Pete and Kitty, they were dating around his time in Marvel Comics. And for Pete, he's kind of jealous at the moment, for me personally. And the reason why, because it's the idea that you have Kitty Pryde wanting to make Colossus feel better. But Colossus is Kitty Pryde's ex-boyfriend. And right now, she's telling her current boyfriend what she wants to do as a way to help out her ex-boyfriend. Now, for Pete, he always cracks jokes. And the problem is that is how he communicates. But for Kitty Pryde, she hates the idea that he does crack jokes. Now, you also have Douglock walk into the room, wanting to hang out with Kitty and also Pete Wisdom. Now, we see right here, right off the bat, that Pete looks at Douglock as Douglock, not as Doug Ramsey. But for Kitty Pryde, she looks at Douglock as the possibility of being Doug Ramsey brought back to life. Now, for a brief moment, we do switch over to, well, Moira McTaggart. Now, for Moira McTaggart, she's right now trying her best to find the cure for the legacy virus. But on top of that, for Moira McTaggart, she is the only human at the moment that has the legacy virus. Now, you have Nightcrawler teleport in the room. And the reason why, because of him, he wants to shift their focus on what to do with the Xavier Protocol. And remember, the Xavier Protocol is just different files on different members of the X family and how to take them down. If those files fall in the wrong hands, anybody can take an X-Men team down just like that. Now, we do kind of get over to the main part of this storyline because getting back over to Kitty Pryde, Pete, and also Douglock, is Pete just going off on Kitty Pryde because for Kitty, she really wants to believe in the possibility that this is Doug Ramsey who was brought back to life. But for Pete Wisdom, no. This being right here is just Douglock trying his best to be that person that you want him to be. Now, with Pete kind of going off on Kitty Pryde, you have Douglock go off on Pete because, again, for Douglock, He can be anybody what they want him to be. He could be Kitty Pryde for Pete Wisdom. He could be Douglock for the entire group. He can be almost any character. But the problem is right now, Kitty Pryde having a hard time accepting the idea that no, he is not Doug Ramsey, that he is Douglock. And you have Douglock tell her like, dude, your boyfriend is the only one who was brave enough to tell you the actual truth. The problem is you're not trying to listen. And so for Kitty Pryde to get her confirmation that this is not Doug Ramsey, you have her, Douglock, and also Wolfbane traveling across the world to the grave site of where Doug Ramsey was laid at. And so for them, as they get there, they can find clues to figure out, is there a possibility that Doug Ramsey is, well, Douglock, who was brought back to life in a different method? Now, while you do have the three characters leave, we do see that somebody is about to attack Muir Island. And that would be the Mutant Liberation Front. Now, we have talked about this group before, but right now, you had this group going out of their way to attack Muir Island. Here's the reason why. Because this is a terrorist group that's trying their best to liberate the mutant race. But the reason why they're attacking Muir Island is because the research of the legacy virus. And right now, the legacy virus is mainly hitting the mutant race, not really hitting the human race just yet. And so for them, that's still not okay. This facility should not be holding on to any type of information that could possibly hurt the mutant race. That also includes the Xavier protocol as well, because all those different files basically say how you are able to take down different members of the X family. Now, this storyline again does take place prior to Operation Zero Tolerance. And the reason why I'm bringing that up right now, because for Mormon Taggart, she realized who's also part of this terrorist group, and that would be Danny Moonstar. Now, we had discovered in other videos way after this storyline that Danny Moonstar is, well, a SHIELD agent. But at this point, no one knows that truthfully. Now, while you have the rest of Excalibur fighting against the Mutant Liberation Front for Kitty Pryde, Wolfbane, and also, well, Douglock, they head over to where Doug Ramsey was laid at, his grave site. And when they arrive again, for Kitty Pryde, she still believes in the possibility that Douglock is Doug Ramsey, but when she does phase in the ground into the grave of Doug Ramsey, what she sees is a skeleton of Doug Ramsey. And so that kind of leads us into the next chapter where you have Kitty Pryde just freaking out, because for Kitty Pryde, she went in that grave, she saw the dead body, the dead skeleton of Doug Ramsey, came out of the grave, looked at Douglock kind of wondering, what did you do? Like, at first, it's her trying to blame Douglock for the idea of the way he looks. But for Douglock, he has no idea, truthfully, why he took the form of Doug Ramsey. And so for Kitty Pryde, she's just over there yelling at him. He's kind of like, stop. I'm not Doug Ramsey. I'm Douglock. I told you that. But it was your mind believing some kind of crazy way, the possibility that I could be your lost friend. And the thing is, I'm not your lost friend. I am Douglock, and that is truthfully it. Now, for Wolfbane, you kind of tell that she was also hoping that Kitty Pryde could be right, but at the same time, she knew in her heart that Douglock is not Doug Ramsey. But for Kitty Pryde, she can't let it go. Now, I kind of want to switch back over to the battle between the rest of Excalibur against the Mutant Liberation Front, because we do see that for Danny Moonstar, she hates the idea that right now the Mutant Liberation Front is attacking Muir Island. And she was supposed to be the person in charge of this mission for them, but the problem is they're all wild cards. Like, they're not really listening to her orders or what they should do right now on this mission. And she was kind of hoping to control everything and make sure no blood is actually shredded here at the moment. But anyways, though, you do have the two parties fighting against one another. Now, switching back over to Kitty Pryde, the whole idea of Kitty Pryde still continues with like, hey, is Douglock Doug Ramsey? Like in her heart, you could tell that she knows there's a possibility that he's not Doug Ramsey. But at the same time, she has to be for sure. And so what she does, she basically takes Douglock and also Wolfbane over to a pizza shop. Now, while being there, she orders Doug Ramsey's old favorite meal. The thing is, for Douglock, he does not like the meal that Doug Ramsey used to like. And so it's Kitty Pryde once again just still holding on to hope, but it's kind of like, girl, you gotta let it go. Now, I kind of want to go ahead and skip to the end of this storyline because honestly, the ending of the storyline really shows that it's Kitty Pryde realizing she needs to move on because you have Kitty Pryde headed over to the home of Doug Ramsey, his parents' home, and she sneaks her way inside. Except when she does, that is when she realizes, oh, they have moved on. Like his family has moved on. There's not them sitting there and wondering, like, is there a possibility that Doug might come back home or Doug Ramsey's still alive? No, they know their son is no longer around. They had officially moved on and basically changed his room as well. And so for Kitty Pryde, that was her wake up call. Like, hey, you should realize he's not here. And when it comes to the Mutant Liberation Front, they do lose to the rest of Excalibur and then abort their mission. So yeah, that's the end of this two-part storyline. I kind of like it because it's Kitty Pryde, finally being able to move on because we kind of see that she was holding on to hope that Douglock was Doug Ramsey. But anyways, okay, so the last few days, I kind of realized something that I'm not really exhausted with the idea of me sitting down and covering the X-Men. It's not me sitting here kind of like, man, I'm just tired covering the X-Men because we did it for a whole year straight, and occasionally I would just tip in a few other kind of storylines from other properties in Marvel and DC Comics. But I kind of want to move away from the X-Men, not completely, like a tad bit, but also kind of bring in a tad bit more of different storylines about different characters. Like, for example, the Avengers, Thor, Superman, those kind of books out there. Heck, even the Turtles as well, because they had an amazing series for a very long time over in IDW. Now, with all that being said, I'm still going to cover some different X-Men stories as a way to build up our X-Men playlist, because right now we're currently working our way up to the hunt for Charles Xavier. Now, with all that being said, we're going to cover this Excalibur storyline that for me personally is kind of interesting, but it does play a role to a certain storyline we did not talk about yet. And that would be the idea of the Archangel and Psylocke Crimson Dawn storyline. Unfortunately, I have not been able to properly find that story somewhere online for me to cover. And I hate the idea of trying to find the issues out there, try to skim the issues in, pray to God the scans look good enough for a video. And so with all that being said, I'm going to put that story on the back burner. But when it comes to that storyline, it did play a major role in the late 1990s when it came to the idea of the Crimson Dawn. Now, I will explain more of the Crimson Dawn as we get into the later parts of this video. But getting into Excalibur, we do pick up with issue number 107. Now, with Excalibur 107, we're kind of trying to get Excalibur back out there again. And the reason why I'm saying that, because as I've been reading all these different X books from the late 1980s up to the late 1990s, I kind of got this weird feeling where you had Marvel every once in a while wanting to have Excalibur take a bigger role in the idea of the X books, because you had the X-Men, X-Factor, X-Force, all these different X teams. But in the last few storylines that we had covered on the channel, it really felt like Excalibur is back where they used to be. The idea of oh, it's that team, but they're over there, away from the other X teams over in America. So we should not really bother trying to make them involved in every single big X event. Like, for example, Operation Zero Tolerance, because they did not have a role in that crossover at all. And they barely did when it came to the idea of Onslaught. Because as we dive into the opening pages of this issue, we're really picking up with Meggan and also Captain Britain being able to spend that time with one another. It's the two of them right now testing out his brand new invention. The idea this aircraft can turn to a car. And it's honestly kind of cool. I wish I had one as well, but it's the two of them being able to spend time with one another. But while you have those two characters out there, we shift over to the rest of Excalibur who are currently stationed at Muir Island. And this is why I say, like, okay, this is Excalibur once again trying to be part of the whole X family. And the reason why, because they're building up their own Cerebro. And now that right there kind of shows that around this time, the 1990s, there was a lot going on for the X family, but especially with the idea that Charles Xavier is no longer around. He was arrested for what happened when it came to the whole Onslaught event. And so with them currently being locked up, the X-Men right now just running around without any kind of guidance. And so it's the X-Men right now just trying their best to do what they can. And for Excalibur, they kind of want to help out how the best they can because they're currently right now building up their own Cerebro to hunt down different young mutants out there they can take in and possibly train. Now, you also have Generation X, but that team right there is over in America. What about other mutants across the world that Excalibur could possibly help out? And really, I kind of like that because we saw that when it came to X Factor. Because when you had X Factor first appeared, they did take in young mutants as a way to train them and help them learn how to control their powers to help carry on the dream of Charles Xavier. And so right now, this is Excalibur just trying their best to do the same thing that Charles did for them back in the day. But I kind of want to go ahead and shift back over to Captain Britain and also Meggan because for those two characters, they're currently right now just walking around the city trying their best to spend time with one another. But the problem is that they're being judged by the public because they're both, well, not both of them being mutants, but Meggan is somewhat. And when it comes to Captain Britain, he is related to a mutant known as Psylocke. And so it's the idea that you have this superhero team known as Excalibur. Most of the team is mutants, but on top of that, this takes place in the middle of Heroes Reborn, right after Onslaught. So it's the idea that with Onslaught supposedly killing off the Earth heroes, you right now have the public blaming Excalibur, blaming the other heroes who are left on Earth at the moment, but especially the mutant heroes like the X-Men, Excalibur, and the list goes on. And for Captain Britain, he is officially done. And I don't blame him here because this is a guy who has done so much as Captain Britain for a very long time up to this point in Marvel Comics to only have the world just constantly hate on him. There have been heroes who had died to make sure to protect this planet. And so it's him saying, I'm done. And for Meggan, she's also kind of done as well. Now, when it comes to Captain Britain and Meggan, they're able to kind of continue on with their day, right? And so you didn't have Captain Britain take Meggan over to this jewelry store to, of course, buy her expensive ring. Now, here's the problem though, because for Meggan, at first, she's really excited, but then out of nowhere, she kind of feels this dimensional energy just coming out of nowhere, and it sends her flying across the store out the window. Now, when it comes to Captain Britain, once he's able to check in on Meggan, he looks up, here comes Spiral. Now, for Spiral, most of the time we see her character, she's kind of dealing with Mojo, this being from the Mojoverse. And so we're kind of left to wonder at first, like, okay, is this a Mojo story? But it's her saying like, nah, guys, this right here is not going to be a Mojo story. It's going to be a Crimson Dawn story because out of nowhere, we do see other characters appear out of nowhere. And apparently, these beings are called the Dragons of the Crimson Dawn. And apparently, they have returned to Earth on a mission. Now, let's just briefly talk about the idea of the Crimson Dawn because it is a very interesting concept. Because in the late 1990s, there was a storyline where you had Sabretooth severely injured Psylocke Like, we were kind of left to believe at first that she was going to die. But then it came to Wolverine and also Archangel, they gave her this magical elixir called the Crimson Dawn that also comes from the Crimson Dawn realm. Now, it did bring her back to life, but this began a different type of journey for her where over time, she begins to build this connection with the Crimson Dawn realm. And over time, she becomes darker and colder towards other people, but also kind of gaining different abilities. Like, for example, being able to teleport with shadow-like powers. It's pretty cool, but at the same time, though, it kind of left us wondering more about this crazy realm. And like I said, there was a storyline called Archangel and Psylocke, the Crimson Dawn storyline, but unfortunately, I can't find those issues anywhere for me to code a story properly on the channel. But when it comes to these brand new characters, they're from the Crimson Dawn realm. But as we dive into the next chapter, it's kind of weird because you don't have Excalibur just rushing into helping Captain Britain out. Instead, we switch over to Colossus and also Nightcrawler. Now, I kind of like this a lot because it's really more of Marvel trying to remind us that these two characters are very close friends, right? They came in at the same time when it came to joining the X-Men. But it's also the idea that for Nightcrawler, he was in Colossus' corner when Colossus was at his lowest at this point in Marvel Comics. Now, for me personally, it was the late 1990s that kind of gave us a few more examples of their amazing friendship. But while you do have the two finish their training with one another and you have Nightcrawler leave, you did have Colossus be confronted by, well, Amanda. Now, I kind of realized something about myself here, that with me kind of covering all these different X books, I am very quick in forgetting some characters to me who are not really important, like Amanda. Now, technically at first, she was important when she did join Excalibur and being that lover to Nightcrawler, but at this point, their relationship is no longer working. It's also the idea that their mother kind of brought in a lot of bad blood between them and other heroes in the world as well. But anyways, when it comes to Amanda, she kind of feels like they have to break up, that she has to leave. And so it's her telling Colossus that she is officially leaving Excalibur and she wants him, Colossus, to tell Nightcrawler that she is now gone. Now, we do shift back over to Captain Britain fighting against the dragons of the Crimson Dawn. Now, this battle is pretty interesting. It does go on for a few pages, and honestly, I kind of like where it goes. But here's the thing, because while you do have Captain Britain fighting against the dragons, they're not really hinting at the idea of what they want to do with him, but they kind of tell us that they need his blood, or possibly killing him is the reason why they're here for, to achieve their ultimate goal. Now, Spiral is there as well, but she's not really joining the battle. And when it comes to Meggan, she's still unconscious at the moment. But while you have the battle going on, we shift over to Kitty Pryde and also Pete Wisdom. Now, for me, this relationship is very intriguing. Like, I don't know. It's just Pete Wisdom being complete jerk 98% of the time. And for Kitty Pryde, she enjoys it. But anyways, for Pete Wisdom, he does receive this email. Now, we're not told who it came from, but we get the idea that it's another lady. Now, while he does receive that email, you do have Kitty Pryde phase into the room. Now, luckily for Pete, she did not see that email that he had just received. But it's also Kitty Pryde telling us, but also Pete, that it's time for an upgrade when it comes to his outfit. But you did have Kitty Pryde being able to spend time with Wolfbane. I kind of like this because for Wolfbane, she has been very worried about, well, her adoptive mother, and that would be Moira McTaggart, because for Moira McTaggart, her main goal is to find a cure for the legacy virus. And we're at that point where the legacy virus was technically put on the back burner. Like, for all the different plot lines going on in X-Men comics, Originally, it was a major concern, like, oh my God, there's this legacy virus out there, but now it's on the back burner. Like, you still have folks out there dying from it and trying to find a cure, but it's not really super important. With all that being said, you have Kitty and also Wolfbane being able to spend some time with one another, and they do go over to this hair salon. And really, that's not important right now for the overall storyline. The reason why, because getting back over to Brian Braddock and also Meggan, you still have the two characters right now dealing with the dragons. Now, it does get to the point where you do have Meggan getting back involved, and you do have Meggan try her best to help out Brian. Now, once she's able to grab onto Brian, you didn't have one of the dragons grab onto Spiral. And the reason why, because they said, listen, Spiral, you're now part of the Crimson Dawn, but you also made a deal with us. And with that deal being made, that means you have to hold up your half of the deal, which also means you have to help us grab Captain Britain, where of course you do have Spiral do that. Now, once the dragons leave with him, it's also now Spiral saying like, okay, listen, Meggan, I'm going to help you out. But to do that, we need to go back over to Muir Island. Now, as we dive into the third chapter, is really when you have the storyline begin to bring in the rest of Excalibur, because the first two chapters that you saw, for the other members of Excalibur, they had no idea what was going on when it came to Spiral and also Meggan, the dragons, and Captain Britain. And so, as we get into the opening pages of the third chapter, at first, it's still the idea that you have Nightcrawler trying his best to make their own Cerebro. But at the same time, you also have like Moira Taggart being upset about the idea of the legacy virus and her being the only human that has the legacy virus. But on top of that is also the idea like, okay, you have Colossus wondering when he should tell Nightcrawler that Amanda is no longer around. But what if all those things going on? Again, this is where you have the rest of Excalibur become part of the major issue. Now, here's the thing, because when Spiral arrives, she does not arrive with Meggan next to her. So, of course, when she does arrive, for the different members of Excalibur, they know about Meggan. I'm sorry, they know about Spiral because she was working with Mojo over the years in Marvel Comics, and she was somebody you could never trust. And so the idea that with her being there, kind of like, hey guys, I'm here, and not really being able to explain herself, you have the different members of Excalibur begin to fight against her. Now, here's the thing, because Meggan also arrives somewhere else next to Pete Wisdom, and for Meggan at first, she's so focused on the idea that she sees somebody in the room, but no one else does. Like Pete says, there's no one else here with them, but the thing is, there is somebody there. But you didn't have Meggan shift her focus back on Spiral because she needs Spiral to get Captain Britain back. But that kind of leads us over to Captain Britain, who's currently right now with the Dragons. Now, with the Dragons, they do inform like Captain Britain, they want to use him as a vessel. The idea to release the Crimson Dawn into this reality. Now, we're going to sit down later on, kind of get a better idea of what they mean by that. But the thing is with the Dragons, at first, they're kind of like, okay, we have Psylocke, his twin sister, who also had a connection to the Crimson Dawn, but it kind of feel like he is the perfect vessel for what they are trying to achieve. But as we do shift over to Excalibur and also, well, Spiral, is Spiral being able to explain things to Excalibur like, I'm here to get you guys to help Captain Britain, but also Meggan. Now, when it comes to Spiral, she does inform us that she was able to part ways with Mojo, and she really thought she'd be free forever. But the problem was that she was then confronted by the Dragons of the Crimson Dawn. Now, with her being confronted by them, she still turned down their offer. But they kind of show her like what they could do in some horrifying way, and that kind of scarred her a tad bit. And so she was really forced to just go ahead and join them. And so when she did officially join them, her main goal then was to find a way out of their deal. And so right now, Excalibur could be part of her way of getting out of that deal. Now, for Excalibur, they're kind of like, it always does seem like there's a possibility you have other plans behind the scenes. But the thing is, they don't know her other plans. And right now, she's their best hope to get Captain Britain back. And so right now, they have no choice but to go ahead and go with her to get their friend back. Now, once they all do leave, there's still somebody else there, the same person that Meggan saw earlier. Now, as we do transition over to Excalibur issue number 110, we do pick up with our heroes arriving at Hong Kong to hopefully find the dragons, but to also find, well, Captain Britain. Now, when they do arrive, you do have a small situation going on between Excalibur and also, well, Spyro. But once you do have everyone calm down, you did everyone realize that for Meggan, she does see somebody else there. Now, this character is actually very close to the dragons in a very special type of way. You see, we're now being introduced to a character known as Zondu, this mysterious character that Meggan can only see. Now, when it comes to Zondu, he is one of the Crimson Dragons in a different type of way. And let me explain. You see, when it came to the dragons and also Zondu, many centuries ago, they were just regular monks. When the Ming Dynasty had failed in China, you didn't have these four monks wanting to kind of bring a new kind of person on the throne of China. And so, of course, they had found the Crimson Dawn. Now, with all that being said, once they did accept the gifts of the Crimson Dawn, the other three monks, better known as the dragons of the Crimson Dawn, they were corrupted by the power of the Crimson Dawn and betrayed Zondu and basically killed him. Now, his spirit was forced to wander across the earth. For the dragons, well, they were locked away in the Crimson Dawn until they ran into Spyro. Now, with all that being said, you then have Zondu explain things to our heroes that the dragons plan on using Captain Britain as a way to release the Crimson Dawn onto this reality. Now, this is going to lead into me kind of skipping forward a tad bit, not too much, but kind of getting into the end of this storyline, the whole idea of no more Captain Britain, because when it comes to Excalibur and also Zondu, they do find the dragons, right? And you do have our heroes being able to take down the dragons very easily. But here comes the big problem though, guys, because once you do have our heroes take down the dragons, for Captain Britain, he has to use his energy, his powers to technically close off the rift that was opening up between the Crimson Dawn reality and the Earth reality. But Meggan also has to help Captain Britain to close that rift. And so while you do have the two working together, you also have Captain Britain at first kind of believe in the possibility that he's going to die. Now, technically, that does not happen at all. With the rift being closed, you do have the dragons just go back into the Crimson Dawn. Now, they also kind of hint at the idea that they might come back, but we still have no idea. But either way, for our heroes, they got Captain Britain back and the rift is closed and the dragons have returned back to the Crimson Dawn. Now, as we get into the very end of the storyline, we do learn here that for Captain Britain, he is powerless. Now, with him being powerless, it also means that he's being removed from the team. So this is once again Marvel in the late 1990s trying to keep the X brand alive the best they could. And the thing was, they kind of felt like Excalibur was kind of slowly dying off. So what could they do? Well, let's do some small shakeups here and there. And so with Captain Britain now being gone, the question is, what's next for Excalibur? Okay, so I kind of want to go ahead and sit back down and continue our coverage over Excalibur. Now, we're going to pick up with another three-part storyline, and really, this kind of picks up moments, hours after the ending of our last video when it came to Excalibur. You see, in our last video, we had talked about the idea of the battle for Captain Britain, the idea that you basically had the dragons of the Crimson Dawn come over to Earth and try to use Captain Britain as a way to allow the Crimson Dawn to come into the main Marvel universe. Now, you had our heroes being able to win the battle, but it left Captain Britain technically powerless. And so with him being powerless, he left the team to kind of figure out what is the next step for his life. life. And that right there is really important because when it came to Captain Britain leaving, it was him and Meggan getting very close to the possibility of getting married. But now he had departed. He's out there in the world trying to figure out what is his next move in life without the idea of having powers in him. And the reason why I keep repeating myself in that first minute is because when it came to Meggan, she did promise Brian hey, I will be here waiting for you. I'm going to wait until you have returned. And so it did seem like at first she's going to be okay. But let's not forget, over time in Excalibur, we have seen this many times where if you had Captain Britain gone away for a period of time, for Meggan, she can't handle the fact that she is alone. And so it's right now her just crying out in the rain at the moment with the idea that she feels like he may never return. Now, he did promise her that he'll come back, but she's kind of in that part where she believes that it is officially over. And so you have Colossus right now just trying to be that good friend for her, just trying to be in her corner, being like, hey, listen, he'll be back, but also get out of the rain before you get sick and everything. Now, for the rest of Excalibur, they're currently inside this building that belongs to Sebastian Shaw. And it's not really them meeting up with Sebastian, it's really more them meeting up with Rory Campbell. Now, for Rory Campbell, he wasn't really part of Excalibur. He worked for Moore Taggart when it came to the idea of hopefully finding a cure for the legacy virus. Now, for the late 1990s, the legacy virus was kind of put on the back burner when it came to the X-Men. Now, with that being said, when it comes to Rory Campbell, he left the lab of Moore Taggart to go team up with Sebastian Shaw. Now, he gave Sebastian some vital information about the legacy virus in trade for the idea using resources that Sebastian has to hopefully find a cure for the legacy virus. Now, we had learned in our X-Men videos, when it came to Sebastian, he right now wants the legacy virus information to create a cure, but to use that cure to make in a lot of money. Either way, is Rory Campbell being able to meet up with his old friends from Excalibur. Now, for his old friends of Excalibur, they're kind of confused about the idea of why he's working for Sebastian. But you also have Nightcrawler saying Pete Wisdom to kind of snoop around to hopefully collect information about Sebastian and also Rory Campbell. And you do have Pete being able to snoop around the place, like looking at the computer that belongs to Rory Campbell. But while doing that, you also have Pete check his own emails as well. Here's the reason why, because in our last video for Pete Wisdom, he got an email from a character known as Beckham. Now, for Beckham, we're kind of left to believe that it's some kind of lady that he was kind of hoping that he would never see again. But unfortunately, she had popped up. And so for Pete here, he called up his old friend Jardine. Now, we saw Jardine in an earlier storyline. Him and Pete were like secret spies for Great Britain. Anyways, for Jardine, he was kind of able to get some information about Peckham, and he tells Pete in his computer message, or video message, sorry, to go to a certain location to get more information. The problem is that the video ends with Jardine dying. So there goes Pete's old friend, which of course makes Pete very concerned about the idea of who is possibly coming after him. Now, once you do have everyone being able to regroup with one another, you do have everyone sit down for dinner at this restaurant. Now, this is where things go south very quickly, and let me explain why. Because while you do have everyone sitting there, it's also Nightcrawler finding out that he didn't just lose Captain Britain, he also lost his longtime girlfriend, Amanda. Now, when it came to Amanda, she was also part of Excalibur. Fun fact here, guys, when it came to Nightcrawler, after Mystique had, lost Nightcrawler, he was founded by a character known as Margali. Now, I'm not going to sit down and try to explain who Margali was, but she had a daughter, Amanda. Now, technically for Amanda and also Nightcrawler, they were adoptive siblings, but it's the idea that over time they became a couple and boyfriend and girlfriend. But when it came to her and Kurt being able to stop their mother from trying to release a demon in London and the whole idea of the Hellfire Club in London, you kind of had Amanda begin to act a tad bit different. And so she told Colossus she has to leave the team. Now, unfortunately for Colossus, he was not really able to tell Nightcrawler about it because, well, they had the battle for Captain Britain, and then shortly after, this storyline right here, the dude forgot. And so it's now Kurt finding out like, hey, you know what? Your girlfriend is gone. But anyways, after all of that, you didn't have somebody whisper something into Kitty Pryde's ear. Now, once that happens, we are quickly reminded about a character known as Ogon. Now, we have talked a lot about Ogon over in our Wolverine videos, not really in our Excalibur videos. But anyways, for Ogon, he was like an old master, a mentor for Logan back in the day. Now, there was this storyline we did not cover because it took place before the Mutant Massacre. And so when it came to our coverage over the X-Men, we had started with the Mutant Massacre. Anyways, there was this storyline where Wolverine and Kitty Pryde were together, right? As, you know, good brother and sister or father and daughter bond. Anyways, for Ogon, he has the ability to cheat death. And let me explain. You see, for Ogon, he kind of changed the form of his body into this psychic form where he's then able to kind of take over different people's bodies in different types of ways. And so when it came to that first storyline, Wolverine and Kitty Pryde, he tried his best to take over the body of Kitty Pryde, which he was able to do, but Logan stopped him. Now, in our Wolverine videos, we have seen Ogon reappear over and over and over again. It's the idea that he has the ability to come back in different ways and take over people's bodies. And so right now, he came back for Kitty Pryde. Now, for the rest of this first chapter of this video, it's just Excalibur fighting against Ogon. But here's the thing, Pete Wisdom was able to scare Ogon out of the body of Kitty Pryde, which for me personally should not have worked. And the thing is, because you have Pete say, listen, I get the idea, you need a host. If the host dies, you die, which means if I kill Kitty Pryde, you will also die. And for Ogon, he's kind of like, dude, there's no way that you will kill your girlfriend. But for Pete, he's like, no, I will kill her to help her, to save her, to kill you as well. And so for Ogon, he does leave. Now, of course, as we all know, he'll probably be back again once again over in Wolverine comics. Now, this kind of leads into the ending of the first chapter, but it sets up the last two chapters that we're going to cover in this video. Because what happens next is that you have the different members of Excalibur go their separate ways for different reasons. Like, for example, for Kitty Pryde and Wolfbane, they go back to Muir Island. For Nightcrawler and Pete Wisdom, they go over to Germany because they both apparently have business in Germany. And for Colossus and Meggan, being friends at the moment, they're going over to a amusement park somewhere in the world. And so just like that, you have our heroes go their separate ways. The problem is that for Colossus and also Meggan, they are then confronted by this suicide bomber on the plane who wants to kill off people like Colossus and also Meggan. And so the chapter ends with the plane blowing up. And so as we dive into the second chapter, what we're getting at the moment, it's really more of us seeing, well, Colossus and also Meggan just trying their best to survive. Like, the plane's going down pretty fast, and for Colossus, he really can't do much. Now, for Meggan, with her elemental powers, she should be able to at least do something. The problem is that there's something kind of causing this feedback where it causes her a lot of pain. And so with her not really being able to use her elemental powers to kind of help land the plane safely, for our heroes, they do crash in the mountains. And we're kind of left to wonder if they are okay at all. Now, we do shift over to, well, Nightcrawler and also Pete Wisdom. Now, remember, they're in Germany at the moment. And so with them now being in Germany, you do have the two characters kind of go after one guy that Pete was looking for. And for Pete, he wants to know if this guy knows who killed off Jardine. Now, the thing is, this guy is not really able to give much information over to Pete Wisdom, but it's also him telling Pete, like, listen, I have no idea who had killed off who had killed off Jardine. But I do know like why he was killed off, because you guys were getting a tad bit too close to something. And so for Pete, he's kind of like, okay, that's not good at all. Like, what could possibly happen down the road? And so while you have Nightcrawler and also Pete Wisdom trying their best to figure out what's going to be their next move, well, over for Colossus and also Meggan, it's Colossus right now trying his best to keep her warm, but also make sure she does not die in his arms as he travels across the mountains they're currently stuck in at the moment. Now, we do shift over to Douglock and also Wolfbane. Now, when it comes to Douglock, we have to remember that technically he is not a mutant, that he is a phalanx. You see, when it came to the phalanx, they had this hive mind. But for Douglock, he was able to break away. Here's the reason why. Because for Douglock, he was created off the dead cells of a character known as Cypher, who died long ago in a storyline called Fall of the Mutants. Now, with his death being there, and also the death of Warlock, when it came to the Phalanx, they built Douglock off the dead cells of those two characters. And so for Douglock, he does kind of look like Doug, their old friend, Cypher. Now for Wolfbane, she had a crush on Doug before he died in the Fall of the Mutant storyline. And so over time, with her spending time with Douglock, that bond right now is also being built up in a way where she might fall in love with him. Now, with all that being said, when you do have her walk out the room, for Douglock, he reads her diary. And we kind of get the idea that he just found out there's a possibility that she has a crush on him. Now, to begin the process of us closing on the second chapter of the storyline, we do shift over to, well, Nightcrawler and Pete Wisdom again. And for these two characters, they had arrived at this location. Now, for Pete, he tried to go there by himself, but you had Nightcrawler being able to follow him. The problem is that while you have the two characters talking to one another, out of nowhere, they're jumped by a mysterious character. And of course, that character is most likely connected to Pete in some kind of way. And when it comes to Colossus and also, well, for Meggan, they found out, really more Colossus finds out, that they're at Wundagore Mountain. Now, this concept right here will play a very major role over in Quicksilver comics if you do sit down and cover his miniseries, because for Quicksilver, he got a miniseries, and I heard it was just okay, but this is also taking place prior to the idea of the heroes who had supposedly disappeared back in Onslaught event coming back into the main Marvel universe. And you see what I mean here after getting to the third chapter. Now, this kind of shifts us over to the idea of the third chapter, right? And we kind of pick up with Wolfbane leaving to meet up with the New Mutants. Now, this storyline does take place prior to another storyline that we did where technically you had the New Mutants reunite for a good old catch up situation. And the problem was they were confronted by the past versions of themselves, but they also discovered like how Magic got the legacy virus. It was an interesting storyline, but at the same time, I kind of felt like it was just Marvel in the 1990s saying like, hey, we got to do anything we can and kind of keep us alive. So give us a random X story. Ooh, let's give a story how Magic got the legacy virus. I kind of hate the retcon. But anyways, it's her saying goodbye to her adoptive mother, better known as Moira McTaggart. So while you have Wolfbane leave to go meet up with the rest of the New Mutants, you have Douglock kind of want to know, like, should he follow after her? Now, you do have the two characters kiss as well. So for Douglock, he's kind of like, man, should I most definitely follow her? Now, we do learn that for Colossus and also for Meggan, they are currently at the Wundagore Mountain. Now, Wundagore Mountain is very special for a set few of characters in the world of Marvel Comics, especially when it comes to Quicksilver, the Scarlet Witch, and also their mother. Now, here's the thing, because there's going to be a storyline we're going to follow over in Quicksilver Comics where, man, okay, Get this. The Acolytes, right? The Acolytes are well known to treating Magneto as their god. Now, with the idea of Charles Xavier shutting down the mind of Magneto back in Fatal Attractions, you then had Exodus become the actual leader of the Acolytes. Now, again, they look at Magneto as, this godlike character. So, around this time in Marvel Comics, for the Acolytes, they wanted to claim Wundagore Mountain for their own. And here's the reason why. Because for the Acolytes, they look at that place as the holy ground because of Magneto's wife, Magda. Because that was the last place that she was technically at. And so for them, they're kind of like, ooh, that area right there is good for our holy grounds for our people. We should claim it for ourselves. The problem was that on Wundagore Mountain, there is this huge laboratory that's currently being controlled by a character known as the High Evolutionary. Now, we had talked about this character a long time ago when it came to our coverage over, oh my God, what was that event called? Because we did every single chapter of that event, and for some reason, it's not in my head in the moment. It was called the Evolutionary War. But anyways, the High Evolutionary is a very interesting character, and really I'm not going to sit down and try to explain who he is because for the sake of this video but also other videos down the road, I'm going to go ahead and just move forward here. But for the High Evolutionary, he built a lab on Wundagore Mountain. So of course the Acolytes, they want him gone, but they also want the mountain in the lab as well. Now, this whole storyline would take place in the Quicksilver series, I want to say. And honestly, this storyline right here does take place prior to the idea of the heroes coming back to Earth, the ones who are currently stuck right now in the Heroes Reborn reality. And the reason why I'm bringing it up right now, because for Quicksilver, he left his daughter behind, Luna, with the High Evolutionary, because her mother, Crystal, was one of the heroes that got transported over into the Heroes Reborn reality. Anyways, though, for Colossus and also for Meggan, when they do arrive here to the Wundagore Mountain lab, they were confronted by the new men. The new men are just these creatures that evolved from animals, but they have human intelligence. Anyways, though, when it comes to these new men, they do take Colossus and also Meggan over to the High Evolutionary. Now, for Colossus and also Meggan, they want to help him out when it comes to fighting against the Acolytes to hopefully defeat them. But for the High Evolutionary, he believes that he should be able to actually win. And so he tells them no and teleports them out his lab and off the mountain completely. So just like that, we move on from Colossus and also Meggan. Now we do shift over to Pete Wisdom. Now for Pete Wisdom, we currently see him as a prisoner. Now we're not really told what happened to Nightcrawler here at this point, but we do see Pete Wisdom be confronted by a new character known as Hobbins. Now, when it comes to Hobbins, we get the idea that she works for Black Air. Now, we'll see more of her in our next video, but for right now, for Hobbins, you need to know that Black Air was this organization that had replaced WHO. You see, for WHO, which stands for Weird Happening Organization, they used to work with the UK government. And then you had Black Air out of nowhere appear and replace WHO. But also, Black Air was working for the Hellfire Club in London and trying their best to kind of control the government from the inside out. Either way, you had Excalibur being able to bring down Black Air. The problem is that right now for Hobbins, she works for Black Air and they're now coming after, well, Pete Wisdom, because Pete did work for Black Air for a short period of time, but he also helped Excalibur bring them down. So of course, he's kind of set at the moment. Okay, so getting back into our coverage over the X-Men, we're going to pick up with technically another Excalibur book, but it's not Excalibur. It's the idea of Colossus getting his own solo book. Yes, you heard that right. You see, in the 1990s, when it came to Marvel Comics, they were really big on the idea of giving all these different X characters different books as a way to expand the brand of the X-Men. You had Deadpool books, Gambit, Beast. They all had different types of books out there in the 1990s. But in the late 1990s, as we all know, for Colossus, he was part of Excalibur. So it kind of did make sense to go ahead and give him his own book, even though it was only a one shot. But it does kind of tie into the overall storyline that was being told around his time in Excalibur comics. Now, for Colossus, he's not alone in this solo book. It's him and the character known as Meggan. Now, this storyline does take place right after the idea where you had Captain Britain leave the team. And so with him being gone, it was kind of a different take for Excalibur, but it's also the idea that you had Colossus and also Meggan kind of go their separate ways from the rest of the Excalibur team to kind of get a small vacation. Now, it's not like, hey, it's the two characters right now going out on some kind of vacation as a date or some kind of bonding process that could possibly lead into a relationship, but it's the idea of Colossus just trying to be a good friend to Meggan by taking her out. Now, I'm not gonna lie though, because the opening pages of the storyline at first kind of had me believing like, it does kind of seem like the two characters could possibly end up with one another, but at the same time, we really can't tell with this one shot. But while you do have the two characters out there with one another, they don't realize that currently they're being watched by somebody. Now, we're going to find out like very soon who is currently watching over our two characters, but for right now, it's kind of like, hey, why in the world is somebody trying to hunt down Colossus, but also Meggan as well? But either way, for the two characters, they came over to this particular area for an amusement park. Now, before you do have the two characters head there, they head over to this museum. And I kind of like this because for Colossus, he is a great artist. Like he loves the idea of painting different kinds of things that goes on in his life or around the world. He loves the idea of kind of showing off his artwork. He loves artwork. And so to see him right now in this museum, but also kind of expressing what he feels like when he looks at a painting and seeing Meggan being able to connect with him is kind of cool. Now, again, we could say like, hey, they're just friends, but at the same time, it could be the possibility of these two characters building a bond with one another. Now, once you do have the two characters finish at the museum, you then have the two characters head over to this amusement park. Now, when they do arrive at this amusement park, at first it does seem like it's going to be a good time, except the problem is it's closed down for a very long time for, improvements. Now, for Meggan, the reason why these two characters came to this city was for this amusement park. So the idea of it being closed really does bother her a lot. She's very upset by it, but you do have Colossus trying his best to cheer her up. Now, while you do have the two characters go over to a nearby diner, well, that is when you have Colossus be confronted by Elizabeth Wilford. Now, this is a character we have not seen in a very long time. Matter of fact, I want to say like when it came to my early days on YouTube, when I sat down to the early days of Chris Claremont's run on Uncanny X-Men, was the last time I had officially talked about her. But when it comes to Elizabeth, she was the roommate to a character known as Amanda, who was part of Excalibur, but also like the girlfriend to Nightcrawler. But for Elizabeth and also Colossus, for a brief moment, they kind of had this thing going for them. Like I said, for a brief moment, but they have not seen one another since that brief moment. And so for Elizabeth, what she sees right now is Colossus with Meggan and kind of wondering if the two characters are together. Now for Colossus, he tells her, no, we're just two friends here on a trip together. Now, once you do have Elizabeth go out of her way to give Meggan a handshake, there was some kind of poison on Elizabeth's hand where, of course, it does knock out Meggan. Now, for Colossus, he begins to freak out instantly here. Now, for Colossus, he does freak out here for a very good reason, but also for Colossus, he's kind of in luck here because out of nowhere, an ambulance does appear to take Meggan away. Now, you do have this Elizabeth person go out of their way to kiss Colossus. Now, when they do kiss, that's when you have Colossus realize that he has been tricked. But on top of that, this is not Elizabeth. But also that kiss on her lips, there was poison. So that poison right now is affecting Colossus. But by the time you have Colossus realize what's going on here at the moment, unfortunately, he's knocked out. Now, we do learn here, yeah, it's not Elizabeth. It's a character known as Miss Locke. And thing is, if you see Miss Locke, you already know who she's with at the moment. And that would be the character known as Arcade. Now, when it comes to Arcade, we have talked about this character so much when it comes to our coverage over the X-Men. It's the idea that he's an assassin, but a very interesting type of an assassin, where you have Arcade go out of his way to build this amusement park where he basically tries to kill you inside these different kinds of amusement parks. And so for Arcade, if he's here, then most likely his goal is to kill off Colossus and also kill off Meggan. But the question is now, why? And also, who hired him? And really, when it comes to Arcade, it has not taken that long to begin the process of playing mind games on Colossus, because once you do have Colossus wake up and look around the area, you have Colossus realize that he's now with the Acolytes. Now, this is a callback to the early days, really the early 1990s for X-Men comics, where in Fatal Attractions for Colossus, at that point, the dude had lost his entire family. His brother, his sister, his mom, his dad, they all were killed off in like a 2-year period of X-Men comics. And so for Colossus, at that point in Fatal Attractions, he was at his lowest. And so you had Colossus leave the X-Men and actually join Magneto in his Acolytes. Now, for the Acolytes, they were this group of people who praised Magneto like he was some kind of god. And so for Colossus, he was part of the Acolytes, but then he realized that was a mistake. And so when he wakes up, he's confronted by the Acolytes, but he also kind of realized this makes no sense, because for the Acolytes right now, it seems like they're back on Avalon, the space base that Magneto had back in the early 1990s that was blown up. And so for Colossus, once he does see Meggan out in space, quote unquote space there, and grabs her, he's then teleported back to his home, the home where his family was living at. But of course, this is a reminder to the idea that for Colossus, well, his family's dead. And so he does rush into the building hoping to save his family. But at the same time, this is a trick. Now, while he does that, Meggan also wakes up. And when she wakes up, she realizes what Colossus is currently doing at the moment, trying to, well, do something big inside that building. She does not have the idea that it's Colossus right now trying to save his family. Now, once you do have Meggan go inside the burning building, she does find Colossus, but not the Colossus that she knows of. You see, Colossus is right now supposedly the Proletarian. Now, this was a form of Colossus once again from the early days of Uncanny X-Men, where you had Chris Claremont working on the X-Men. It was the idea that you had Arcade back then bring Colossus to be this person who loves Russia so much, but from the working class. Now, when it comes to Meggan, she's very confused about what's happening at the moment, but you didn't have the real Colossus appear to fight against his robot self. But once you have our Colossus being able to defeat this fake Colossus, you did have Colossus realize who's behind everything. We already know who, but for Colossus, he now knows it's Arcade. Now, we do learn that for Colossus, that technically he was in this virtual reality. So once you had Colossus being able to break free from that, you didn't have Colossus be confronted by Arcade. Now, Here's the thing though, because when he is confronted by Arcade, you have Arcade say, hey, listen, the reason why I kidnapped you and also Meggan here is because I need you to kill me. Now, it's not really him asking Colossus to officially kill him off, but to pretend to kill him off. Because whoever hired Arcade is not going to let him go until he's able to deliver Colossus and also Meggan to them, but officially dead. And for Arcade, he does not want to kill them at all. But if Arcade does not kill Colossus or kill Meggan, then yeah, he will die then. And so it's him saying, I need your help. But it's also Arcade reminding us that, hey, let's not forget that Colossus did kill off two people. You have Proteus, the son to Moira McTaggart, and you also had one of the Marauders back in the Mutant Massacre, and that one was really brutal. He just snapped the guy's neck. But either way, it's him saying like, dude, come on now. Like, first off, we're just pretending here that you do kill me, but also like you killed in the past. So what is the quote unquote issue here at the moment? And so as we fast forward to the idea of us now picking up with Colossus and Meggan, they're kind of going through the plan of Arcade. Now for Meggan, she has no idea what's going on. Like matter of fact, there's a whole scene where you do have Colossus not really trying to bring down Arcade or kind of put himself out there. And you have Meggan being very confused because when she wakes up, they're in the middle of a whole like fake battle where it's Colossus and also Arcade battling against one another, but also like it's Colossus letting loose, quotation marks around that. And so by the end of this section, when you do have Colossus being able to quote unquote kill off Arcade, but not really, you have Meggan get very upset. And honestly, I don't blame her. It's kind of like, hey, listen, why in the world did you not tell me that we're pretending to kill off this man? Now, technically for Colossus, the dude did not have the time to sit her down and be like, hey, listen, so here's a game plan. And this is how everything is going to go down. But on top of that, also for Colossus, they kind of got thrown right in the middle of the whole situation. But either way, you do have Colossus quote unquote kill Arcade, but not really. And you also have Meggan realize what's going on here. But once you have the entire group being able to regroup, you did have Arcade tell Colossus and also Meggan like, who's behind everything? It's the idea of Black Air. Now, we have talked before about Black Air in the past. When it comes to Black Air, they are this organization that was working for the UK government. And matter of fact, originally, they were just used to replace the WHO organization, the Weird Happening organization. But then later on, we had learned that when it came to Black Air, they were also working with the Hellfire Club, but with the London branch. And when it came to the Hellfire Club and the London branch, they were trying to work together as a way to control the government, to have their own plans be pulled off when it comes to controlling the world, but starting off with just the UK. Now, you also had them try to release this powerful demon back in issue number 100. Now, for me personally, the overall storyline was pretty cool, but I kind of hate that issue a tad bit. And the reason why, because it kind of felt like issue number 100 was supposed to be part of the whole Onslaught event, but it wasn't. It got left out. But either way, you had Excalibur being able to bring down Black Air and kind of have them be removed from the UK government's control completely and no longer being able to overthrow the UK government. And so it does seem like right now the Black Air organization is trying to get their payback against our heroes in all different types of ways, because in the storyline prior to this one, you had Pete Wisdom and Nightcrawler get attacked by Black Air as well. Now, getting into the final part of this storyline, we do pick up with Colossus and also Meggan getting a free ride from Arcade to get away from Black Air, because Black Air was still technically following them and wanted to, well, kill off Colossus and also Meggan. Now, when it comes to Miss Locke, I do want to say this right here. Miss Locke died a long time ago. And so what you're seeing right now is not Miss Locke. It's an android that is pretending to be Miss Locke. The original Miss Locke died a while ago by the hands of, well, Arcade. And so you have this android just pretending to be her. But either way, you do have all four characters go on a boat and leave the docks. Except right after they leave the docks, we see black air was going to surround the entire area, which again ties into what's happening around this time over in Excalibur comics. Okay, so like when it comes to Marvel comics in the 90s, I don't have any hatred for Marvel comics in the 1990s. I really don't, because they had provided us a lot of great stories. But at the same time, they had also provided us some random stories that I would not truly think of when it comes to like, we should make that move with that character over there and see how it goes and how the fans possibly would like it or not. And the reason why I'm saying that, because in the late 1990s, for Marvel, X-Men was their number one property, and they were trying their best to keep that boat floating long enough so that they would not disappear in the comic book world. And the reason why I'm saying that, because today we're going to cover Kitty Pryde, Agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. And honestly, when I saw this like on my reading order a while back, I was kind of like, there's no way that's an actual storyline, right? And it is a 3-part miniseries that came out in the late 1990s. Of course, ties in with Excalibur, but not really. But it also brings back a character I've seen in a good while. Now, you do have Larry Hama, who did write Wolverine for a good while there, work on this book here. So let's see how you guys may or may not enjoy this book. Because as we get into the opening pages of the storyline, we really do pick up with Kitty Pryde and also, well, Pete Wisdom just hanging out on Muir Island. Now, while you do have one of the two power couples of Excalibur just hanging out, well, then out of nowhere, this aircraft appears. Now, this aircraft belongs to S.H.I.E.L.D., but the problem is for our heroes, they know that S.H.I.E.L.D. is based out of America. So with that being said, they have to have special kinds of clearance to land in other parts of the world, like Muir Island. And so for our heroes, they're kind of wondering, why in the world is S.H.I.E.L.D. here for? Now, we know, they don't know, but when they do arrive, we also get reminded that by this point in Marvel Comics, and I'm pretty sure about this, that Nick Fury is not around. And so with him not being around, that means G.W. Bridges is in charge, but he kind of shares that role with 2 other characters in the Marvel Universe. Now, with that being said, when he does arrive, he's just straight up rude to the different members of Excalibur. And it's kind of like him saying, hey, you know what? You can try to fight me or hurt me or whatever. Just know that you're gonna fail. Like for GW, he does not care what kind of powers you may or may not have, but either way, he's going to win. Now, with all that being said, for GW, he does inform Excalibur why he's there for. He's there for Kitty Pryde. This begins the process of her becoming a S.H.I.E.L.D. agent, because for Larry Hama, he's not trying to waste any time at all. But this story does kind of go in one crazy direction. With that being said, for GW, he says, listen, there's some kind of computer virus right now bringing down the different systems on the helicarrier. And apparently when anyone else tries to get rid of the virus, they can't do it. But apparently the virus is asking for one person who has clearance to get rid of the virus, and that is Kitty Pryde. Now the question is, how in the world is a S.H.I.E.L.D. computer getting a virus, but the only person who has clearance to get rid of that virus is Kitty Pryde? But either way for Kitty, she agrees to go ahead and go with GW. Now for Pete Wisdom, he says no. But really for me, this is another example of the idea of their whole entire relationship just falling apart. And the reason why, because for Pete Wisdom, even though Kitty does like him, he is kind of a jerk. And I kind of feel like fans did not really like this pairing at all. I don't know. For me, I'm like, it's all right, I guess. But either way, you do have Kitty Pryde inform Excalibur that she'll be leaving because she needs some space away from the island, but also kind of gives her the chance to do something new in her life. Now, right after you do have Kitty Pryde leave Excalibur and Muir Island, she's then taken over to this store, right? Now, once she does arrive at this store, they do tell her, like, you need to go to dressing room number 12. When you do go there with a pair of jeans, don't touch the walls. And the reason why, because she will then be transported over to, well, the helicarrier. Now, for me personally, I'm kind of like, you're doing too much, because I feel like, I don't know, Muir Island, you're already there with an aircraft. Why not go ahead and just take her back over to the helicarrier? But when she does arrive, she does, use her fingerprints as a way to get that clearance for the virus to go away. Now, once you do have the virus go away, she's also being confronted and greeted by, well, a character known as Rigby. Now, once he does arrive, we get the idea of these two characters liking one another. Now, for Kitty Pryde, she does kind of get upset here. And the reason why, because for Kitty Pryde, she kind of feels like her being dragged all the way over to the helicarrier to just use her fingerprints as a way to get rid of the virus is kind of pointless. Like, this could have been done in a more or less aggressive way on the way how she was brought over to the helicarrier. Now, for Rigby, he was able to calm everyone down, like Dum Dum Dugan, Kitty Pryde, and also Valentina as well. But once you do have him being able to calm everybody down, you then have Rigby go ahead and take Kitty Pryde away. And the reason why, because now with Kitty Pryde being here with S.H.I.E.L.D., she's not an intern. So it's him saying like, let me go ahead and show you around because you are a computer genius and we need you on the team. Now for Rigby, he's a tad bit more advanced when it comes to computers, but we get the idea that that hobby right there, the love for computers, is most likely going to bring these two characters together. But this kind of leads us into the ending of the first chapter. And the reason why I'm saying that, because when it comes to Rigby being able to help Kitty Pryde get a tad bit more comfortable being at S.H.I.E.L.D. and everything, and also getting her S.H.I.E.L.D. outfit, we also learn here that even though Rigby is also an intern, the brand new system that S.H.I.E.L.D. is currently using was technically built up by him, which means that he is on a whole nother level when it comes to most S.H.I.E.L.D. agents who work in his department. And even though he's an intern, he's their best guy. Now, while you do have Rigby go out of his way to run diagnostics on the system to make sure that whatever kind of virus the helicarrier had received will never come back, well, that is when we learn who had basically uploaded the virus into the actual system. It's a character known as Ogon. Now, we have talked a lot about Ogon over the years when it comes to our coverage over the X-Men, really especially when it comes to Wolverine. And let me explain. You see, for Ogon, he was the mentor for Wolverine. And really, when it came to Logan, he looked up to Ogon a lot. The problem was Ogon had showed his true colors, just of course being that evil person. But when it came to Ogon, he found a way to cheat death, which was being able to transport his psychic form into different people's bodies and use their bodies as a way to stay alive. Now, originally, he wanted Kitty Pryde when he first appeared in Marvel Comics, but you had Logan being able to protect her all the way back then. But over time, he would reappear in different types of ways. Now, we have saw him in two different storylines. The first was that he was kind of was going after Wolverine, but he took over the body of Lady Deathstrike and then just disappeared. And there was another storyline where he tried to take over the body of Kitty Pryde, but Pete Wisdom was able to scare Ogon away, which for me I kind of find a tad bit weird, like Ogon being scared of Pete Wisdom like that. But either way, when it came to him being able to take over the body of Lady Deathstrike, it kind of gave him the ability to turn himself into a cybernetic psychic form, where now he's able to upload himself into computers. And so the whole idea of the helicarrier getting a virus and only Kitty Pryde having the clearance to get rid of the virus was because of him just trying to pull her back in, where of course it does technically work. But here's the thing, because for Kitty Pryde now being here is him showing off all the different skills he has. Like, for example, bringing back that virus to mess up the helicarrier. There's now a possibility the helicarrier might crash into the city. On top of that, he pretends to be her by using her voice to call up Logan because he wants to meet up with Logan, quotation marks there. And for Logan, he cannot tell the person on the phone right now is not Kitty Pryde, that it's Ogon. And apparently for Logan, he believes it is Kitty Pryde. So he leaves his apartment to go meet up with Kitty. But in reality, it's Ogon finding a way to hurt Logan as a way to get to Kitty Pryde. And so this kind of leads us into the second chapter, right? Now, as we get into the second chapter, what we're seeing right now, it's really more of Kitty probably beginning to freak out because she realized the helicarrier is falling out of the sky, but also she no longer has the access to the computer system of the shield helicarrier because for Ogon, he left that out there so that he can lure her in. Once she was there, that clearance she had, gone, taken away in a matter of seconds. And so now for her, it's like, what do we do next? Now, you have her run over to the main computer to hopefully shut it down so that for Rigby, he'll then have the chance to hopefully, regain control of the helicarrier before it crashed into the city. Now, for Wolverine, he's also on his way. But for Wolverine, he was able to quickly put two to two together. He's all like, why in the world would Kitty Pryde ask me to meet up on the bridge in my uniform? But also, why is the helicarrier falling out of the sky? Now, for Wolverine, he does pick up on the scent of Kitty and realize that she's in danger. Now, for Wolverine, is him being Wolverine. He does use the motorcycle and the bridge as a way to hopefully get onto the helicarrier. But for Kitty Pryde, once she does make her way over to the main computer, the problem is that she's now confronted by Ogon again. Now for Ogon, what he did was he appeared now as a dead corpse, but the hologram still. But for Kitty Pryde, it's still the possibility of him being able to take over her body if she walks through him. But she has no choice. She has to shut down the system to kind of help Rigby regain control of the helicarrier so that it does not crash into the city. And so once you do have Kitty walk through Ogon, she does feel all these dark emotions. But right after that, you didn't have S.H.I.E.L.D. being able to stop the helicarrier from crashing into the city. Now, after all of that, you do have Kitty and Rigby being able to regroup with one another. And when they do, it does seem like for Rigby, he's going to make his move on Kitty Pryde. But then you have Wolverine appear. And when he appears, he kind of ruins the whole entire moment. But it's also him saying like, hey, I'm here to help out Kitty Pryde. But this kind of leads into the ending of the second chapter because once you do have our heroes try to make a game plan, like for example, you do have Rigby try to reset the system so that Ogon will not be able to take over the system again. While you have Rigby doing that and you have Kitty Pryde and Wolverine doing something else, you have Ogon being able to sneak up on Rigby and then be able to take over his body. And so for Kitty Pryde, she has no idea at first that Rigby has been officially taken over by Ogon. But you know who did recognize that he was taken over by Ogon? Well, it'll be Kitty Pryde's good old friend Dragon, Lockheed, because Lockheed kind of realized there's something off about, well, Rigby. It's the idea of him being possessed now by, well, Ogon. But now we kind of transition into the third chapter, right? And for me personally, this kind of shows that for me, this whole entire series just shouldn't have been made at all. And the reason why, because we open on the third chapter with Rigby trying to make the move on Kitty Pryde. And for Kitty, she believes it is Rigby, but in reality, it's not him. It's Ogon just using his, well, body. And so after a while, she didn't realize that, no, it's Ogon right now trying to use his body. Now for Logan, he also appears as well. But for Logan, he wants to go ahead and kill off Rigby here. But you have Kitty Pryde say you can't do that because if you try to kill off Rigby, it's not going to get rid of Ogon at all. Matter of fact, for Ogon, he'll just come right back in a different body or a different type of way. Now, for Kitty Pryde, what she wants to do is challenge Ogon on the astral plane to get the body of Rigby back. Now, while you want to have those two characters fighting against one another, now, the rest of this chapter is really more of us just seeing, well, Wolverine and also Rigby work their way over to the main computer like Kitty Pryde did earlier, except this time they're kind of hoping to shut down the main computer to give S.H.I.E.L.D. control again over the helicarrier. Now, while you have the two characters do that, for Kitty Pryde, she battled against Ogon on the astral plane. Now, for me personally, this part kind of ticked me off a tad bit because in the middle of the battle, you have Kitty Pryde bring up the idea that with Ogon trying to fight against her on the astral plane, that means he's no longer truly able to focus on the helicarrier. And so for Ogon, he's all like, oh, you're right. And he shifts his focus back onto the helicarrier. Now, for Wolverine and also for Rigsby, once they do make it over to the main computer, you didn't have Wolverine go out of his way to just destroy it, because at first he does try to press the button. That does not work, and the reason why, because of Ogon. But once you have Logan being able to just destroy the entire computer, but you also have Kitty Pryde being able to defeat Ogon on the astral plane, the day is saved. Like, that's the actual ending of this book, where it's Kitty Pryde coming back to her body and being like, hey, is the day saved? And Wolverine kind of like, yeah, we won, but just barely, because they were so close into crashing into the Statue of Liberty. And the book ends on that note. So yeah, that was Kitty Pryde, Agent of S.H.I.E.L.D., a very random storyline I kind of felt like was not needed at all. But with that being said, guys, please leave me a like down below and subscribe. But guys, see y'all next time. Later. Okay, so let's go ahead and get back into our coverage over Excalibur. And we're going to pick up with issues number 114 and 115. Now, when it comes to Excalibur at this point, there was kind of like this massive storyline over the idea of Black Air, because the whole idea of Black Air does kind of lead into other books we already covered, like for example the Colossus one-shot. It's on the earlier issues as well. Now, when it comes to Black Air, we have to remember that Black Air was this organization that had just popped up out of nowhere that had replaced the WHO organization. Now, when it came to WHO standing for the Weird Happening Organization. And so we were kind of left to believe at first that Black Air was just going to be the new WHO in Marvel Comics. The problem was that over time we had learned that Black Air was working with, well, the Hellfire Club, the London branch. And for the Hellfire Club, what they wanted to do was to control the government by using Black Air. And we kind of covered that storyline over in Excalibur issue number 100. And really, that issue right there, I still kind of hate, because it was a whole idea of us believing that it will take part of the whole idea of Onslaught, but in reality, it has nothing to do with Onslaught at all. Now, as we get into Excalibur issue number 114, the opening pages kind of go in two different directions. And what I mean by that statement is that when it comes to Kitty Pryde at the moment, she's right now trying to find her lost friend, a dragon, better known as Lockheed. Now, for Lockheed, in our last storyline for Excalibur, I kind of forgot to mention this, but for Lockheed, he was being chased down by these shadow-like creatures, and we have no idea what's going on with those creatures just yet at the moment. But for Kitty Pryde, she had no idea that Lockheed was being chased down by those shadow-like creatures at all. Now, for Kitty Pryde, while she's trying her best to find Lockheed, she does get confronted by, well, Douglock. Now, this right here kind of leads into what we already covered, the whole idea of Douglock going with the New Mutants for a reunion, and a storyline we already cover where you have the New Mutants come back together but also be confronted by their past selves, but also discover like how Magic got the legacy virus. And for me personally, that storyline was one of those stories that we did not technically need it, but like Marvel still gave it to us. Either way, though, this right here kind of leads into the idea of that storyline, because with Douglock is him now beginning to gain feelings for Wolfbane. And so for him, he's kind of like, yeah, you know what, Kitty Pryde, I do have a crush on somebody. Now, he does not tell her who the crush is, but we already know it's Wolfbane. And for him, he tried his best to leave the island, Muir Island, to hopefully go find her to, express his feelings for her, because before she left, they kissed. Now, getting over to Pete Wisdom, he also was confronted by somebody from his past. and that will be a character known as Saint Hubbins. Now, for Hubbins, she's part of Black Air as well, but the thing is, we had learned early on that she was slowly coming after Pete Wisdom by sending him an email, but also going after different people that were close to him. But it's also her working with Black Air because Black Air is trying to get back at all the different members of Excalibur for what they had done to them in the earlier storylines that we already covered. And so right now for Pete, he's a hostage. Now, we still have no idea technically what happened to Nightcrawler, but you do have her say like, hey, you know what? This is me getting revenge against you for what you did to me. And we're also getting the idea here that they used to be a couple in the past, but Pete did something to her that truly did upset her a lot. Now, we kind of switch over to Colossus and also Meggan. And really, this is kind of picking up from our previous video we already did, Colossus one-shot he got in the late 1990s. And for me personally, I kind of feel like it was a tad bit too late. My man Colossus should have got a series a long time ago. Like, it's Colossus, y'all. But either way, in that one-shot, him and Meggan had spent some time together just as friends, and they went over to an amusement park, or they tried to. The problem was that in that storyline, they ran into Arcade. Either way, it's them right now coming back over to Muir Island. Now, when they do arrive back to Muir Island, they do see Douglock begging them to stop the boat they had just used to get over to Muir Island so that he'll then be able to get to an airport to hopefully catch up to Wolfbane. And you have Colossus go out of his way to make sure the boat does not leave Douglock behind. Now, for Meggan, we also get the idea, really more the book saying like, hey, listen, I know we had a one-shot where it was Colossus and Meggan alone together, and there were a few panels there. It made it seem like they might become a couple, but no, for Meggan, she's waiting for Captain Britain to come back because that's the man she truly loves. And we see her say it to us in the book here. Now, for a brief moment, we do switch over to Moira Taggart. Now, remember, for Moira Taggart, she's the only human so far that has the legacy virus. And technically, we're kind of getting close to the end of the whole idea of the legacy virus. And I kind of feel happy about that because with our coverage over the X-Men, we have been covering the X-Men since last year on this channel. And in that 1 year of coverage, we're still on the idea of the legacy virus playing a major role in X-Men comics. And we cover like everything 1986 and up. But either way, for Moira Taggart, she does get an email from S.H.I.E.L.D. And of course, that email was for Kitty Pryde. This leads into a Kitty Pryde, Agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. storyline that we may or may not cover. It's it's something, but it's also the idea of Marvel trying different things with their characters. And really, speaking of Kitty Pryde, we still see her right now trying her best to find her missing dragon. And the thing is, she does not find him, but you do see the dragon Lockheed try his best to get away from the shadow creatures. But the shadow creatures tell him like, hey, you can try to run, but we're still going to follow you. We're still going to find you. So, hey, keep running, but sooner or later, you're going to be ours very soon. Now we do switch back over to Pete Wisdom, right? And when we do, it's still Pete still being a hostage for, Hubbins. Now we do learn here, like, what is the actual connection here? Like, yes, they were a couple in the past. For Hubbins, she was a contract killer. And even though, like, he was working for the government, he still loved her. The problem was that she tried to assassinate the queen, which honestly for me is pretty wild because you would go after the one person he's like swore to protect. And so he had no choice but to go ahead and like turn in his girlfriend, turn in Hubbins. And he was kind of hoping in the idea that she'll go to rehab and kind of come out of it okay, and they might be able to continue on. The problem is that none of that happened. He moved on. He found Kitty Pryde. He's now part of Excalibur. Like, a lot of things happened in a very short period of time for Pete Wisdom. Now, with all that being said, the issue does kind of wrap up with Pete being able to break free and kind of take down Hubbins. Now, he does not arrest her, but he does tell her, like, tell Black Air to back off because if they don't, my friends and I, Excalibur, will come after you and them and bring them down again like we did before. And the book kind of ends on that note right there. Now, as we dive into Excalibur issue number 115, we're really getting into the idea of the possibility of us saying goodbye to Moorman Taggart. And the reason why I'm saying that because we pick up with Banshee, right? And for Banshee, is him just arriving to Muir Island. Now, in the 1990s, when it came to Banshee and also Moorman Taggart, these two characters went through a lot because in the 70s and 80s, they were a couple. But for Banshee, though, by this point in time, he was kind of in the middle. He had feelings for Moorman Taggart. He still loved her, but at the same time, we saw a few panels that he was slowly beginning the process of him like possibly falling in love with Emma Frost. And the same thing goes for Moorman Taggart. She loved Banshee, but at the same time, she was also kind of going back to Charles Xavier. And let's not forget, in the earlier storyline, like mid 1990s, for Charles Xavier and Moorman Taggart, they had kissed one another. So it's kind of like, hey, is there a possibility of these two characters getting together? Now, with all that being said, once you do have Banshee arrive to Muir Island, we do learn here like what Moorman Taggart is planning to do. She's planning to, well, quarantine herself. And the reason why, because how dangerous the legacy virus truly is. Now, in an earlier storyline, when it came to Meggan, she kind of realized that there was some kind of design to the actual virus. And what she meant by that was when it came to Strive creating this virus, he kind of made sure this virus can be complete chaos. And the reason why I'm saying all of this because for Moorman Taggart, once she does see Banshee, and you do have the two characters talk to one another, and for Banshee, his main goal at first was to convince her to not lock herself away. Once you have Moorman Taggart break everything down for Banshee, he kind of realized where this is going because she does show the different people who have been killed off by the legacy virus are currently holding on to the legacy virus. And what Moorman Taggart is trying to say is that for the legacy virus, there is no actual connection. Like all these different people have different power sets, and that's the thing right there. And then you throw in Moorman Taggart, who's a regular human, bam. Again, there's no connection. It's just complete chaos, which means that this virus will continue to evolve until it is able to wipe out everyone on the planet Earth. And so for Moorman Taggart, she wants to lock herself away so the virus cannot spread out her body to other people, but to also find a way to get a cure to save the entire world. And that right there is really important. Now, this issue does kind of pick up after the whole idea of the New Mutant storyline we had covered, because issue number 114 took place prior to that storyline, and 115 takes place after that storyline. And so for Wolfbane and also Douglock, they're kind of stuck in the middle, right? It's the idea of like they want to be together, but there's too much going on their table at the moment where they truly can't be together. But for Douglock, it's him telling Wolfbane that he'll wait for her until she is officially ready for him. Now, that's when you have Banshee walk out and kind of give Wolfbane the bad news about the idea that he was not able to convince her mother to change her mind about the idea of locking herself away. But while you have all that going on, we then switch over to Pete Wisdom. Now, for Pete Wisdom, his main goal is to find Nightcrawler. That's the problem right there because for Nightcrawler, he was taken away by Black Air. And so you have Pete trying to use Cerebro, the one that Nightcrawler had built to hopefully find Nightcrawler. And again, that's the problem though, because for Cerebro, at first, it doesn't work properly. And really for Pete Wisdom, he gives up very easily and walks away. Except while he's walking away, we do see that Cerebro did find Nightcrawler possibly. Now, when it comes to issue number 115, it also kind of does a huge switch up. And what I mean by that, the idea of Colossus and also Meggan. Because earlier I said like, hey, it was 114 trying to establish the idea that Meggan does not love does not love Colossus at all. Her main focus right now is Brian Braddock, and hopefully he'll return very soon so that they can get married and be a couple again. But you see, for Meggan and also Colossus, they have spent time with one another in Colossus one shot. And so even though the last issue said that Meggan does not feel that way, for Colossus, it does seem like he's holding back some kind of information. And we're also kind of getting the idea that there's a possibility that dude might have feelings for Meggan. We don't know yet, but it's up there now. But it is Colossus coming to her saying that it's now their time to say goodbye to Moira McTaggart. But this leads us over to Banshee. This is why I said earlier, when it came to Banshee, he was kind of in the middle. There's Emma Frost, and there's also good old Moira McTaggart. Now, he likes Emma Frost, but he loves Moira McTaggart. And so he calls up Emma to give her an update about what's going on when it comes to Moira McTaggart. This is pretty important, and let me explain why. Because when it comes to Banshee here, he's calling up Emma to say, like, hey, Moira McTaggart is going to lock herself away until she is able to hopefully find a cure for the legacy virus, but she might die as well while she's locked away. And so for Banshee, when he tells Emma that, Emma does not really show any kind of empathy. It's not her saying like, oh man, I feel bad for her. I feel bad for you. It's like, well, somebody had to do it. Well, goodbye. And she leaves. And it's like, dang, Emma, that's pretty harsh. And for Banshee's all like, I hate her. We already know the dude somewhat likes her too. And so this all leads into the ending of this storyline where it's Moira McTaggart saying goodbye to everyone who's currently there at Mirror Island. And so as she goes inside, the door begins to close. Now this door, it cannot be opened from the outside nor from the inside either. And so at the very last second, you have Wolfbane jump in there as the door closes. And the thing is for Wolfbane, she hates the idea of being away from her mother who basically raised her. And so for Wolfbane, is her kind of stuck in there now with Moira McTaggart with the possibility of her also getting the legacy virus as well. Now, here's the thing, because for Douglock, that also means that he might no longer have a chance to be with Wolfbane. And so the book ends on that note right there. So with that being said, guys, please leave me a like down below and subscribe. But guys, see y'all next time. Later.